substrate of consciousness, out of which things arise dependently. So I'm also fascinated by Buddhism. I'm happy that you brought it up. I got into researching it for quite some time, and I'm still interested, particularly in Madhyamaka Buddhism, which is, we spoke about the middle path earlier between being a gardener and being an architect. It's a similar idea, Madhyamaka, the middle way. The idea that there is the ultimate truth, which is emptiness. You can reduce something down into its constituent parts until it's empty. Atom, it came from the Greek for indivisible, but we know that we can divide an atom down and down and down, and we can just keep dividing until it becomes energy. And the example which is often given is the chariot. The chariot is an assignment which we've given to a collection of different phenomenon, and we've called it a chariot. But is a chariot its wheels? Is the chariot its rider? Is the chariot the horse? So you can keep reducing, negating until we discover that the thing is empty. So that's one understanding. That's the ultimate kind of truth. But then there's also the conventional truth, which is that things exist insofar as they relate to each other. You can only observe an electron when it makes a quantum leap, when it interacts. And so holding these two seemingly contradictory ideas in the mind is Madhyamaka Buddhism. And what's really fascinating is that John Keats, the great poet, talks about negative capability, which is what he describes as the peak state of the artist. And negative capability he describes as the ability to hold two seemingly contradictory truths in your mind without any irritable reaching after fact or reason. And that he's describing exactly that, walking the middle path and being comfortable with the mystery and acknowledging that that is a wonderful way of being, and perhaps the only way of being, or the way of being which results in the least harm. And isn't that a thing to aspire towards?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That touches on so many just fascinating and exciting ideas of the middle path, like the duality. It's like the yin and the yang, of finding the way that two polarities can exist in a synergy. I can't help but look at, so I think, especially in the West, politically, we've become, it's very polarized. There's the left and the right are not getting on very well, and each side seems to think that they are right, and that they are, if only they could take total control, then they could fix the world. But from my perspective, I think that every democracy seems to work itself into a system of where you have left and right-wing parties of liberal conservative values, and it should work as a synergy. For some reason, that's not happening just now, and I'm sure there's many reasons for that, and we could talk about that at length. But as you said, do think it. I can see sometimes when people they will take on just a singular or a one-sided ideology and philosophy, and it can trip them up. You can't see the world in its totality. You cannot walk the middle way because you've chosen a polarity. I do think that is a dangerous thing, but it's so human. It's so natural to want to do that.
Yeah. So, fascinating. And this is what we were speaking about earlier, in the sense that we cling to rigidity, to certainty. This is attachment, because it gives us a sense of safety. If this is real, I can cling to it, and that gives me a reason. And it's making the connection that that mindset is actually ultimately damaging, and that when we're certain we are closed and lose the ability to listen and adapt. I think some of the key traits of a writer are humility, adaptability, and imagination. And like we said earlier, how we write is how we live. So, that's not to say that you can't have, intimations, suggestions, beliefs. But it's always realizing that we live in a network of beliefs, and that when we're certain, we can disregard the network of beliefs, and that can ultimately be damaging and painful. So, yeah, I think you advocate for, and I think I advocate for, listening, no matter where the other person falls on the political spectrum.
So when you set out to tell a story, like The Man on the Endless Stair, what are you setting out to do? Why do you do it? Why did you write this book?
I think that's the question, isn't it? Why do anything? I've always understood the world through narrative and processed ideas through narrative, and I think stories are incredibly important vectors for psychological truths, and I've always understood this, and so it's profoundly strange to be here alive, isn't it?
Yeah.
So why not look to the stories which have been passed down through the traditions of various cultures, look at the stories written today, in order to kind of glean some insight into the strangeness of it all. So I think I'm just in awe a lot of the time, and in a state of wonder a lot of the time, at the peculiarity of things, and writing has always been a way for me to channel that, and ask questions. And I think it's quite important as a writer, and you'll understand this as a journalist, how you ask the questions, and to always understand that you are only ever asking questions, and that to give an answer would be to be certain, and we know where that gets us. So it's how we frame the question, and I think one of the questions which I was asking The Man on the Endless Stair is, how do we escape a cycle of trauma? Which was a question which has always been on the forefront of my mind. Does it apply to journalism as well? When you're interviewing people, you can't come in with a direct agenda. Maybe you know.
Absolutely, yeah. You're trained not to ask leading questions. So it's like, do you think this is the case? It's like, no. You need to, you have to be like as centered as you possibly can be, and you need to ask as open questions as you possibly can, and then allow your interviewee to explore their own truth themselves. And you cannot come in with a kind of a preset agenda and an answer that you want, because then who are you to do that? Who are you to say this is how the world is and this is what happened? That's not really anybody's job to do that, and nobody really knows either. The as you're saying, that we are all just these maybe cars with like the headlights. You might have this little circle of light around yourself. You might be able to understand, as you're saying, the stories that we've been passed down through thousands of years. There's unbelievable value in reading them and understanding them, and looking for the patterns and seeing which stories have been told again and again and again and again. Mostly also through word of mouth. Writing is, it's only kind of recently that people have become literate, and that, we haven't, almost 100% of people in society are literate. That has only happened over the past maybe 100 years or so. Throughout the rest of that time, those stories were being passed down through word of mouth, through an oral tradition. And It's, what is left of a story after it's told over 1,000 years are the parts that are true. So trying to understand these stories and use them to shed light on reality is, there's, I think, huge value in that, and give me great peace and better understanding. But you also need to remember that you're still so limited, and that all that you know is that you know nothing. That is, I think, what Socrates came to as one of his final conclusions, was that all I know is that I know nothing.
Yeah, that chimes with Blaise Pascal, who said the last step of reason is understanding the infinity beyond it. So yeah, and so the antidote to, because you can, I think one of the reasons why these ideas are sometimes shied away from is because it can push people into nihilism. Or if nothing means anything, then what's the point of anything? And we can go back to this, but working in the alternative school, I experienced a lot of that attitude, and you have to ask yourself what has happened to these young people in order for them to adopt that way of viewing the world. But I think, for me at least, these ideas are incredibly exciting and freeing, because you understand that if the universe is malleable, if we participate in the generation of our reality, and if consciousness plays a key role in that, then whatever I am, has a say. And how freeing and how wonderful, but it's scary. And I think in order to reach that point, it is required that we experience the deep state of wonder and gratitude and appreciation for everything. And so that's something I try to cultivate in these writing lessons, wonder. So I think wonder is the antidote to nihilism.